Mark, we've got a colleague coming out from London, and of course the request has gone out. What does everybody need from the UK you can't get from here? What's your answer to that?
Marmite. I'm a big Marmite fan.
All right. Terry's chocolate orange for me.
Baked beans as well. My wife, she brings baked beans out from the UK, which might seem mad.
They have baked beans here, though, yeah?
They do have. Heinz is an American company from Pittsburgh, yet the baked beans don't taste the same.
You reckon?
You can get British baked beans here, but they cost a lot.
Yeah, reminds me of haggis, actually, which we get for special occasions. You cannot get a Scottish haggis in the United States. We order ours from a bakery in Detroit, which is twice the price. Half the taste, I'm sorry to say.
Very good. I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm James Matthews. Mark, you and I have been busy on Capitol Hill this week, not just because of one Nigel Farage. He's been here testifying in front of congressional members. You spoke to him. Me, I've been speaking to victims of Jeffrey Epstein. They are calling once more for the release of the Epstein files. I was at their news conference.
Yes, we'll talk more about that. Plus, what is a vaccine mandate and why has Florida become the first US state to get rid of mandates? Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we've talked about him lots on the podcast. He's been on Capitol Hill, hauled over the coals about his latest changes to health policy across the nation.
And that isn't even the biggest health story this week. That would be the story that wasn't, as the president was asked in the Oval Office, how did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? We'll explain.
So, James, quick question. Why on earth was the Reform Leader Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea in Washington?
Well, Mark, you're not the first to ask. We spotted him, didn't we, on his way in, just outside the Capitol. He was unmistakable.
He was. Very, very bright suit, I thought.
Luminous blue.
Yeah.
Kind of 70s pop star.
It was very bright. We then saw it later in the Oval Office because there was a photo of him posing with his on-off pal, Donald Trump.
So we did manage to grab him on his way inside the building. You asked him a few questions.
Yeah, I've actually known Nigel Farage for a long time. He was the proud troublemaker in Brussels back in the Brexit days. He was the MEP. I was based in Brussels, so I got to know him a lot then, interviewed him a lot when he was there. Brexit and all of that followed. More recently, though, James, he has been spending a lot more time in the United States. He's become very interested in US politics. I think there are two reasons that he was in DC over the past week. First, to highlight, as he sees it, the rolling back of free speech in Europe and in particular in the UK. He appeared before a House Congressional Committee to tell the American lawmakers that Britain had become, wait for it, North Korea, and that the Americans should actively lecture the UK about this. And even, he said in written testimony, apply economic pressure. Now, that clearly got the hackles of the left in the UK. Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying how unbelievably unpatriotic it was for this member of Parliament for Reform to come here to tell Americans that Britain was broken and even to suggest that there should be economic sanction. As you say, I caught up with Nigel Farage before he went in and he appeared to contradict, to me, what he'd said in written evidence.
I have not suggested that for one moment. That is the interpretation of a Prime Minister who is very much on the back foot over this.
But you have suggested that Trump should perhaps sanction countries.
I have not used that word in any way at all. Sorry.
So what have you said?
I've said that I hope that American political parties, leaders and businesses have a frank conversation with the British government and say, if you don't sort this out, it's going to have serious trade implications for both of us.
Yeah, Farage's opponents back home and indeed here accusing him of coming to DC, selling Britain by the soundbite. Now, if Starmer wasn't happy with him, neither was Democrat Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Listen to this sample of that congressional hearing.
The dictators of the world have got nothing to fear from this hearing. The Republicans called it to attack our democratic allies in Europe. The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime. while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most. This hearing's just a drive-by hit against a strong Democratic ally to benefit a Donald Trump sycophant and wannabe.
Yeah, it was quite something to watch. And you know, if Nigel Farage knows how to seize a moment and spin a line, I wondered as I was watching all this unfold whether he'd met his match on this side of the pond and the other side of the political divide. It was excruciating stuff. The other thing, James, there was kind of an odd curiosity about this hearing because what we had was the right in Britain, Farage in this case, and the left in America, Raskin and the others, kind of using this moment to warn about what they see as the erosion of freedom of speech in their own countries, both sides scoring political points for sure, and you'd expect nothing less.
Yeah, interestingly here, Mark, there is a particular interest in the Trump sphere here around free speech in the UK. I was in the Oval Office when the UK-US trade deal was signed. And it struck me then the extent to which it's received wisdom here on the right, you know, that free speech is a problem in the UK. That's certainly the way that it's presented. It is the big battleground, the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of expression in the United States. As much as the Trump administration would present itself as defenders of it, there are, of course, examples aplenty that suggest otherwise.
Yeah, books in schools, content in museums, reporting in the media, and yes, content on social media, all restricted under this Trump administration. I just add, I said that I thought there were two reasons that Farage is spending more time in America at the moment. The second, I think, is because he sees political capital in cozying up to Donald Trump, because he believes that the MAGA movement that we're seeing here in America can bounce over to Britain. At least he hopes so. We know that reform's agenda mirrors the MAGA agenda in many ways. And so he and his political and media surrogates want to demonstrate that the MAGA franchise in Britain is the future. But anyway, on the other side of Capitol Hill, you were covering an altogether different event.
Yeah, I was, Mark. Something very powerful, actually. A dozen victims of Jeffrey Epstein, survivors of abuse, women who in this story have always been reduced to a cameo role. You know, we don't hear from them often in a story that we hear every day, but it's become mired rather in politics and process. This, for me on Capitol Hill, was a moment when the story got real. We heard from the humans at the heart of it, girls, when they encountered evil outside the Capitol, now women strengthened by a shared experience and with an absolute clarity and certainty about what they want, justice and accountability.
It was a whole operation. Everyone knew what they were doing. Everyone had their role to play. They passed along women and children like human batons from one person to the next up the chain till they're assaulted.
They're trying to bury us. They've been trying to bury us for 20 years.
Release the Epstein files. It's simple.
Now, the survivors were joined by politicians. Lined up at that news conference with Democrat politicians was, remarkably, Marjorie Taylor Greene, our old friend. Trump loyalist, of course. You know, they don't come more MAGA than Marjorie.
This is the most important fight we can wage here in Congress, is fighting for innocent people that never receive justice. And the women behind me have never received justice. The truth needs to come out, and the government holds the truth.
I saw your report. It was really odd to see her standing there next to Democrats that she would normally have absolutely nothing to say to.
Yeah, which is why it is a difficult one for Donald Trump. Remember, he once counted Jeffrey Epstein as a friend, and that's put him in a very difficult position with his own support. People want to know who was involved with Epstein and how. And, you know, interestingly, the survivors, they said they'd be compiling their own list of Epstein-associated abusers. They said it would be confidential for themselves. I think part of that is to counter government moves that they're not happy with. The interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, which offended them, and it also offended people who say, you know, if you want to know who's guilty, ask the victims. Why have you not asked the victims?
Yeah, watch this space with Ghislaine Maxwell, because remember, she was interviewed by members of the Trump administration. We've seen the transcript of that interview. She was then moved from a high security prison to a much more cushy prison. She wants a pardon from Donald Trump. That would be something.
Yeah, I think the Epstein files, Mark, is the slow burner that won't go out. And it's one that exposes Trump's vulnerability. Just how vulnerable I think we can measure in Congress. The politicians who are looking to push this legislation through, they only need a couple of Republicans to back it, to get it over the line. So it's shaping up as a loyalty test to Trump. And I think the dynamics of that have changed with the survivors stepping forward. That spectacle, for me, was a thunderous reminder of the people at the centre of this story and the moral imperative that's at stake. You know, it's about politics, but it's about much more. Now, Mark, there's big news in the world of health here in the US. Florida deciding this weekend to end vaccine mandates. That means that youngsters in the third most populous state will no longer be required to receive vaccines against preventable diseases, including measles, mumps, chickenpox, polio, hepatitis. You know, vaccines that have saved hundreds of thousands, if not many more, lives for decades. The man in charge of making these calls is Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo. He had this to say.
Who am I as a government or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God. What you put into your body is because of your relationship with your body and your God. I don't have that right. Government does not have that right.
Yeah, this is part of a move not just by the right-wing government, the state government in Florida, but also by the National Health Department, run by anti-vaxxer RFK Jr., to get rid of many structures that have been put in place for health across the country over many years.
Yeah, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Health Secretary, he was called to appear in front of a Senate committee to defend not just his views on vaccines, but also that decision that we covered last week to fire the director of the Centre for Diseases Control. RFK Jr., he faced the senators on Thursday. There were protesters in the committee room before he spoke. And, well, let's just say many of the senators weren't happy either.
Robert Kennedy has elevated conspiracy theorists, crackpots, and grifters to make life or death decisions about the health care of the American people.
Sir, you're a charlatan. That's what you are.
Do you accept the fact that 1 million Americans died from COVID?
I don't know how many died.
You're the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You don't have any idea how many Americans died from COVID?
Look, you are putting America's babies' health at risk, America's seniors' health at risk, all Americans' health at risk, and you should resign.
Senator Sanders. Everybody is corrupt, but you? Is that what we're looking at? I don't think so. And I think the issue now...
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, I think you do know what I'm talking about. To suggest that every institution, the AMA, the pediatrics people, is corrupt because they disagree with you is an insult to the American people.
Listen, people disagree with me. How am I a threat?
Secretary Kennedy, for the first time, we're seeing deaths from children from measles. We haven't seen that in 2 decades. We're seeing that under your watch. You are a hazard to the health of the American people.
A hazard to the health of the American people. Goodness me, that was quite some grinning. Bernie Sanders certainly had his shredded wheat, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was on fire.
Yeah. I mean, well, they are running around with their hair on fire. It's crisis time, and as they laid it out plainly, opponents of RFK Jr., he is the fox in the henhouse when it comes to the health of the nation.
Yeah, no, RFK Jr. is such a fascinating character, isn't he? We've talked about him a lot over the episodes on Trump 100, from the Kennedy dynasty, once the independent candidate that ran against Trump, then suddenly in the fold. But from a Democratic Party dynasty, now Trump to a T. And, you know, it strikes me that he's got so many different opinions, views and pronouncements. It's almost as though everyone has something that they agree with him on and lots of things that they don't agree with him on. You know, the basic principle of make America healthy again. You know, what's to argue with that? But then he seems to have such a complex jumble of contradictions and conspiracies, doesn't he?
Yeah, you know, he's a real political operator. So, you know, he is very much the quintessential politician who can play the political game. But, you know, as we've heard from his critics there, he's in a serious position and widely regarded, not just by opposition politicians, but scientists, career experts who have looked into vaccines and the matters of public health. They regard him as an unserious man in a very serious job.
Now then, James, just before we go, and on a related health matter, none of us expected that we would ever hear this question coming from a journalist in the Oval Office.
Peter? President Trump, something completely different, but about a big viral social media trend over the weekend. How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead?
So, James, did you hear that Trump might be dead?
I heard that every 5 minutes for about a day and a half. I don't know about you, Mark. I got a text from my brother, actually, one of those texts saying simply, "Is it true?" To which I answered, well, probably. What's the question? He was talking about Trump, of course, and... well, we all checked, didn't we?
Yeah.
That would have been quite the story, but it wasn't quite.
I was up early, very early last Saturday morning. I went to a vintage car show in Virginia.
Naturally,
very different story. I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about. But I got chatting to someone, and the first question, like it was only 7:10 in the morning, the first question, when he knew I was a journalist, he said, have you seen what's on Reddit? Have you seen what's on Twitter? I said, no. And he said, have a look. Sure enough, "Is Trump dead?" was trending on Twitter and on Reddit. I mean, they'd gone down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I can just see you racing back to the White House in your vintage car to cover that one. But I suppose that's what happens when you live stream your presidency. You go missing for 2 minutes, everybody thinks there is something wrong. Put that together with the bruise on the back of the hand. You know, you can see why social media was on fire. And of course, we were back in work Tuesday. His news conference was scheduled. In fact, it said Donald Trump makes an announcement. So we thought, goodness me, what's this going to be? He gave a radio interview just before that. And do you remember, he didn't sound very
great.
Croaky.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh, blimey, this could be the one.
Maybe your brother was right.
Well, yeah, as he would tell you, he usually is. But of course, Donald Trump appeared.
Yeah, of course. And you know, Pete Ducey from Fox News, he's the one that asked that question you just heard. Corker of a question, and the answer came from Trump.
No, I heard that. I get reports. Now, you knew I did an interview that lasted for about an hour and a half with somebody, and everybody saw that was on one of your competitors. I did numerous shows and also did a number of truths, long truths, I think pretty poignant truths. No, I've been very active, actually, over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff.
Donald Trump, the president, still punching.
Indeed, that is all we've got time for this week. Thanks for listening. If you want to see more of my exchange with Nigel Farage, you can find it on my Twitter page, Stone_Sky News. James, what are you?
I'm James Matthews Sky for X. Are we calling it X or still Twitter? It's Twitter, isn't it?
You on Truth Social?
I'm on them all, but you know what? You won't see my reports on Instagram. I'm kind of invitees only.
Like an exclusive club?
Well, yeah, yeah, because I got too much abuse on Twitter, so I thought I'm not going to have that on Instagram. But,
my Instagram is open for all to see.
Well, there you go. And abuse.
Yeah, that too.
Okay, well, listen, thanks very much indeed for listening and for watching.
Questions, thoughts, comments, as ever, Trump100 at sky.uk.
Have a great weekend.
See you next week.